periodization, coming from a sports scientist background. So that's what, in terms of, like I say, I'll touch on, and I know, like I say, Ian will go a lot more deeper into the sort of coaching elements of it. So should get quite a nice balance there of exactly what it is. I said I'm going to give sort of a sports science perspective on sort of what I see in tactical periodization. I'll sort of run through some comparisons with other models briefly. I'll give a bit of a case study of when I first came to AIK in terms of, you know, the game model that was implemented there, and then in that time also we've changed sort of aspects of that, and in terms of what challenges and what did I see from that from a sports scientist point of view, and then also going into, you know, what the future roles of a sports scientist are. So if we give a sort of brief look at, you know, what is tactical periodization, what are the key concepts. Let's move off a little bit. So ultimately, like I said, it started in Portugal. You know, it's quite commonly used now by a lot of coaches out there. Mourinho was one of the most famous ones that have used it. But Brendan Rodgers, who Ian's worked with, who else has used it? Yeah, Guardiola uses it as well, or elements of it, definitely. So it's probably one of the most common up-and-coming methodologies used out there. And it's basically the sort of key concepts of, you know, the tactical, technical, physiological, and psychological elements are never trained independently. Every exercise is organised around at least one of the 4 moments of the game and the tactical principles of play. As you can see there, they're offensive organisation, transition from defend to attack, defensive organisation, and transition from attack to defend, and also set pieces as well on top of that. But, you know, if we're just looking at the four moments in the actual open play anyway. And then, like I say, a team's game model has principles, sub-principles, sub-sub-principles for each moment of that game. And that's something, like I say, Ian will go very deep into. And then there's ultimately, you know, quite a few methodological principles. And that's something that I'll sort of touch on now after this, in terms of which ones sort of apply to the sports scientist and what we sort of take from it. But you can see there's quite a few. You know, you've got performance stabilization, horizontal alternation, complex progression, systematic repetition, and a few others as well. But they're the main ones that will sort of apply to the sports scientist. It's over again, sorry. Well, you can't see. So basically, what does that mean then to a sports scientist? Well, coming from a sports science background where, you know, all we're sort of concerned about is the physical condition of the exercises. Well, you know, if we're going to apply a tactical periodization model to it, it means that, you know, the physical conditioning exercises should be football-based and specific to the game model, the moments of the game. So, you know, everything's done with the ball, everything's done on the pitch, you know, and specific to how you want to play. You know, so they don't encourage you to spend time or lots of time doing isolated running drills, because obviously you're only ever training the physical element there and you're missing the other 3 components. You know, horizontal alternation, which basically is their microcycle, their weekly microcycle. And their sort of main point in it is no 2 days within the given week are demanding the same physical fitness component. And that's something I'll go on to the next slide and explain a little bit deeper. But it's one of their very key principles in terms of how the, you know, each session has specific elements to that day of the week in that session. And they see the physical component of it is they call it the biological framework of exactly what tactical periodization is. So your tactical elements might change day to day, but your physical component of each day of the week should be the same. And that's what I'll go on. Also, to do with progression, you know, always as a sports scientist, you're thinking of progression as reps and sets and volume and intensity, but, you know, they talk about complex progression, whether that's within a session, so whether that's going from your warm-up into your conditioning drills. It's not just about the physical components, it's also about the technical and tactical and psychological components, and that each drill has its own complexity rating almost. And then lastly, like the physical loading patterns should be consistent week to week. And this is one of the big ones that sort of relates to the sports scientists, in that, you know, we want to maintain optimal performance. They don't see any week as less important as the other. You know, every week is important, and the performance should be, or your model should be built around that and being able to perform every week on your match day at 100%. Okay. So if we look at sort of what is that weekly microcycle look at, I touched on this a little bit in the last sort of presentation, but, you know, if we're starting off, you know, on the game day, you know, you've got a game day on the Saturday, then you'll have 2 days after it as recovery days, one off, one active. Normally always to give the first day off from a mental point of view to mentally recover. And then the second day after that is an active recovery where, you know, the players will come in, they can still do something on the pitch that's, you know, got all the elements in, but the intensity is very low and it's very, you know, like I said, based around recovery. Then they have the 2 conditioning days. Some models also include the speed day as an acquisition day, they call it. But, you know, if we're looking at from a physical point of view where the main conditioning elements are coming, you know, it's on that match day -4 and match day -3, which they break up into an intensive conditioning day, which will be lots of small spaces, really high intense, you know, games like 3v3, 5v5, small-sided games. You know, from a physical point of view, it's going to have lots of accels and decels in it. You know, it's going to be at a really intense level, and, you know, you're talking small-sided games are going 2, 3, 4 minutes max, really. So really intense periods, and like I say, really high intensity. So then we go into our extensive conditioning day, which is much different in terms of, you know, the space that we're playing in. So opening it out into sort of 11v11 or 8v8, it can go all the way down to. But basically, we're looking at targeting big spaces, you know, much longer duration in that. You know, hit from an energy systems point of view, it's a little bit more aerobic, whereas the intensive day is purely anaerobic. And we're going to be hitting a lot more high-speed running in there, larger total distances, and ultimately giving you a different stimulus to what an intensive day will give you. After that, those sort of 2 blocks we're going into those 2 days before the game, the next game anyway. So, you know, there's not going to be a lot of volume in what you do. And they characterize match day -2 as a speed day. Now, as a sports scientist, you may start thinking, well, you know, we're going to do sort of, you know, speed drills in terms of, I don't know, sled pulls and acceleration mechanics, top speed mechanic work. But in reality, it's not really like that. We're talking about doing tactical things, but really good speed in terms of match intensity, but we're not doing a lot of it. We're doing a good rest in between, and we're not, and, you know, certainly a low volume. So the overall load of that session is not very high, but there's still quality in what you're doing, and that's the key thing. And then going into your last day before the game, your activation day, where, you know, you're working on very small things, reactivity, little bits of tactical stuff, you know, like set pieces, but again, very low, to make sure that on that on that following Saturday in the game, everybody's fully recovered and ready for it, and 100%. So in terms of, that's the sort of tactical periodization model. So if we're looking at how that does that compare then to sort of other models out there. You know, your traditional sort of British model, where you'd have similar sort of mind in terms of, you know, recovery, 2 days off, and then you'd have a 2-day block of, you know, where you could put that conditioning in, and then again 2 days before the game where you do mostly match prep work. But the traditional sort of model will look at doing only 1 conditioning day and then giving 1 day off. And the main difference is they will do a lot more on that one day than you do normally on just an intensive day or just an extensive day in your tactical periodization model. And they see that in terms of, you know, you pick a certain physiological stimulus that you want to overload, and then you're really overloading that, and then you're giving everyone the next day off to fully recover from that, so that you can go into your match prep work fully recovered. And that's been, you know, around since, I don't know, a very long time anyway. But, exactly. And then the other most popular one, probably Raymond Verheyen model, which is similar in some ways to your traditional British model in that you'll have one main conditioning day. But that will be match day -3. So they like to have a sort of easy restart day after 2 recovery days, get into an overload type day where they'll rotate that as well bi-weekly. So, you know, for 2 weeks you may do 11v11, and 2 weeks after that you'll do 7v7, 6v6, so medium-sized games, and then 2 weeks after that you'll go around to 3v3, 4v4, really small-sided games, and then it'll usually rotate like that on a 6-week sort of block periodization.
What does RV stand for, Mike? Sorry?
Raymond Verheyen.
Oh, right, yeah.
That was his sort of model that he introduced with his World Football Academy, and obviously very popular across a lot of Europe in terms of, you know, how he's portrayed it and how it's worked. But in essence, what we're looking at is it's got one main conditioning day. You know, so the main differences from tactical periodization to the other two, I'd say, you know, you've got 2 conditioning days, and also if we're looking at that over several weeks, you know, even if you're doing the British model where, you know, you may rotate similar to what you do in Raymond Verheyen's model, in that, you know, each week you may have a different focus of what you want that conditioning session to be. Whereas in the tactical periodization model, you're consistent in your loading, you know, you're consistent in that, you know, your match day -4 is an intensive day, match day -3 is an extensive day, and that doesn't change.
Okay. And Mike, on that, I mean, in terms of injuries, is that the tactical periodization model is you're looking at that from obviously gaining less injuries, or?
Yeah, well, I think like this was the reason why I like it as well, and I think there's a lot more research coming out now, and you listen to a lot of the sports science guys, that the most key thing in terms of reducing injuries or injury risk is preventing like spikes in training load. So for me, when you're doing tactical periodization model and every week's the same, then your load's going to be very consistent. So you're not going to get big changes in load week to week, you know. Whereas if you're doing just that one conditioning session a week and then you're going to rotate that week to week, then yeah, you could potentially get a lot more fluctuation between your load. If you're looking at things like high-speed running, for instance, it's quite heavily correlated with hamstring injuries. So say, for instance, you do 2 weeks of 11v11 as your conditioning session. You'll do a lot of high-speed running, and then you're going to go to 2 weeks of 6v6, 7v7, where you'll do less running, high-speed running. Then you'll go to 3v3, 4v4 for 2 weeks, where you'll do virtually not a lot. And then the week after that, you're expected to then go and do 11v11 again, and then you're going to get a big spike there in high-speed running, unless you're sort of topping up throughout other sessions in the week. So yeah, for me, like that sort of blocked-based periodization, you're getting big fluctuations in your load, and that's for a big sort of no in terms of, you know, preventing injury.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's one of the sort of pros that I put here for the tactical periodization, in terms of that. Yeah, you, like I say, you're consistent in your weeks, and also as well, say for instance you're a player, you played the game on the Saturday, you go and you got a knock or something like a kick on the ankle, you can't train full on that conditioning day, on that 3 days later. So you're going to miss that conditioning day. You can't do it full. But you're a main player, so they're not going to give you it 2 days later or 3 days later or too close to the next game, because they want you to be 100% fresh for that game at the weekend. So therefore, you've missed that block of conditioning. And if that's, for instance, the last 11v11 of a 2-week 11v11 block, you're not going to get that 11v11 again for another 5 weeks, almost 4 or 5 weeks. So, you're really fluctuating then in your load, unless you sort of really start chasing your numbers and doing a lot of extra stuff outside of it. Then, I think that's going to be a potential big injury risk. So, it's, of course, there's people have a lot of success with that model, and that will, perhaps do top-ups and do extra things that perhaps are outside of it that will keep up those high-speed running meters, so you don't get the fluctuations. But yeah, I think it just makes your life as a sports scientist harder, if that's the approach you want to take.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So,
and the work, I mean, for those that weren't on the webinar we did around individual development within a team game, where do you actually, the isolated work that you do with players, how does that fit into that?
Yeah, well, like we said previously, obviously the thing is, when you're working purely football based, no 5v5 might ever be the same. Do you know what I mean? In terms, so 1 week, for whatever reason, maybe the coaches change the teams, or if you're stopping and starting, the quality's not great, then yeah, maybe the load from that actual 5v5 isn't the same as the previous weeks. So that's where the technology comes in. You could see that live. You could see what the actual load was from that session. So therefore, then, if you needed to do top-ups and extras for certain players, for whatever reason, then you can do that on your sort of conditioning days. And you do something that complements that session, you see.
Okay. And then what kind of parameters is that working in from the physical load?
Yeah, in terms of the numbers, what you look at.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if, for instance, for an intensive day, you may have a certain number of sort of accels and decels that you may want to hit, like total amount. If you see a player that's not hit that, then you can easily just go and, like I say, work with one of the coaches, give them another drill at the end of the session that's going to complement that. So working on, again, little short sprints, accelerations, decelerations, and a finish maybe.
Right.
And just to give him that extra little bit.
And that'll be, sorry, would that be position specific as well, that you would have come up with those?
Exactly, yeah. So the way myself and Sean, the individual coach at AIK, who we did the webinar with, he will come up with a plan in terms of, what specific drills for that player in his position, based off the tactical things also that he wants to work on. So that's where we combine it all together. So we'll highlight that, if somebody needs extras with the physical data, and then he'll go away and take that and then use that and plan an extra drill, whether it be, 5 reps, 10 reps, 20 reps of it, depends on exactly how much distance or how many accelerations or decelerations we need to top him up with.
Right.
Okay, perfect. So, yeah, just to also go on with the pros and cons of sort of what I see from a tactical periodization point of view. Like I say, it's more agile for those players that miss sessions. You're going to, if he misses the intensive day 1 week, he's going to get that session again the next week. He's not going to potentially have to wait 5 weeks to get that same physiological stimulus. And then also with looking at the types of conditioning drills that people are doing, and like I said, with our intensive days, you know, you're working very small-sided 4v4s, 3v3s, 5v5s, and then your extensive days, sort of anywhere from 8v8s up to 10v10s, 11v11s. And there's a bit of research by Boucher that looked at those drills and how well, and not only those drills as well, but like 6v6, 7v7, 8v8, 9v9s, and which ones best represent match locomotor demands. So which ones are your best training, you know, your match specific physiological characteristics. And he concluded that, like I say, that it was the 4v4s, the real small-sided ones, and your very large-sided ones that actually, you know, overtrained or overloaded you in certain physiological aspects. You know, your medium-sized games, your 7v7s, your 6v6 were sort of neither here nor there really. They were, you know, they didn't really overload you from a distance or high-speed running point of view, and they didn't really overload you from an accels and decels point of view. And that's not to say they can't be useful, those types of drills. You know, you can use those types of drills when you want to reduce the intensity a little bit for whatever reason. But if we're talking about purely conditioning our players, then for us, or for me anyway, those are your best drills. But of course, there are some cons to it all. It's not all singing and dancing, you know. Ultimately, when you're doing 2 conditioning sessions, you're not truly overloading perhaps on that day as you would do if you were going to only do 1 conditioning session. So you know, a lot of people say perhaps you're only just training sort of semi-hard. You know, you're not going full out because you know you've got another conditioning day the day after that you don't want to be completely destroyed for. And then also when we're looking at that speed day, you know, if you're talking about getting real quality with any kind of speed drill, it's going to be difficult because 2 days worth of conditioning, you know, you're going to go into that day fatigued and tired, like if you've done it properly anyway. So that speed day for me is sort of a little bit up in the air, questionable in terms of, you know, how much from a physical point of view can you really push them anyway. And if you do push them too much, then you're going to get an injury. And then lastly, sorry, go on.
Sorry, I was going to ask you there on the games program, like so if you've got those 2 conditioning days in there at the middle of the week and you're playing obviously in Europe, like you know, you have been week in, week out, how does that work?
Oh yeah, so sorry, for instance, if you had 2 days a week, then yeah, you wouldn't have that conditioning block. You'd just be recovering and preparing for the next game. So yeah, you take out this conditioning block here and you'd have a game either on the Tuesday or the Wednesday. So again, all you'd be doing is recovery type exercises, and then here you may get a little bit more activation, push them slightly a little bit harder going into that game, but nothing major, because, you know, if you've got 2 games in a week and they don't need any extra conditioning, the games are the conditioning.
Yeah.
And lastly, something that I certainly got a lot of when I first came here, because they were very used to sort of the Heinz methodology over here, or sorry, even having a midweek day off. You know, it is mentally tough for players, staff, as well, if you're going 6 days in a row. You know, it's not that easy, especially when you're used to having that midweek day off, just for everybody just to mentally refresh. So, you know, you get some players and staff that will sort of complain about that and not really buy into it as much. So that's probably one of the major cons that you get from getting buy-in from people.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on that before I go into sort of the next bit?
Just around the players themselves. Do they ever question the parameters that you've set?
Yeah. I think definitely when I sort of first came and they weren't used to doing 2 back-to-back conditioning days, like they'd never heard of it before. So they were like, "What? No, we need to recover." But then, you know, when you sort of sat them down and explained them, saying, you know, we're not gonna go, you know, a 9 out of 10 today on this conditioning day. We're gonna do like a 6 out of 10 today, and then we're gonna do a 7, 8 out of 10 tomorrow instead. You know, so I think once you explained it to them and once they saw how they felt, and you know, and I think it was tough for them at first. But I came in and implemented it straight away, right in end of pre-season when the games had started. And I remember a lot of the lads were going into that first sort of game a little bit tired because, just weren't used to it, And we had a couple of little niggles here and there because we changed the way we load them. But after a while, we got robust to it, the fitness increased. And, we went into the sort of summer months where, we're doing the European qualifications and we're playing 2 games every week. I think we had 90%, 98% availability from all of our players. So the work that I did from coming in there sort of March time, build them up into that, and they reap the benefit of that in the summer.
Brilliant. And have you ever had any players then, when they've become conditioned and robust, ask you to say, well, I don't feel like I'm working hard enough in the position that the parameters you've set within that position, for example?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's especially coming in this time at the minute, where this Corona time, where we did our pre-season, we pushed them really hard, really hard, and they were, because we knew we had to try and win the cup at the start of the season. Built them up to try and do that, and then coronavirus came, and then we had to take it all back down. So we went for about sort of 2-3 weeks where we're just sort of doing reduced training just to keep ticking over, because we knew that if we carried on at that load, they'd be dead by October, November time, when potentially we could still be in season by then. So we've got that a lot in this sort of last period now, where we're just saying, no, we're just doing that to keep ticking over, and they want to do more because obviously they're fit and they're healthy and they're strong. But again, I think once you explain it to them and explain, no, we're doing this so we don't die towards the end of the season and we're not too fatigued, and that we peak and we could sustain our performance, then they understand,
Yeah, great.
Perfect. So just going into, again, sort of a little bit of insight into what I've come across with AIK. Last season we had a very sort of distinct way of playing that they've used for many, many years. And then at the start of this season, they wanted to change certain elements of that. So this is my take on terms of what did that look like to us from a physical point of view anyway. So, like I say, go into a lot more into all this sort of stuff, but, just to give you sort of brief insight, previously we're certainly in our defensive principles and sub-principles, like we were we're a very low block team. We immediately after losing the ball, we'd always drop down deep into a compact shape, we'd get men behind the ball, we'd make it difficult for the other team, we'd let them come onto us, so we created space in behind their defensive line. We'd do a low block press, win the ball back, and then immediately try and counter attack, and that was the game plan that they've used for years and years and years. But this season, the coach wanted to change that. He wanted to go to a much more aggressive, high press type of defensive like principles. In terms of immediately pressing after losing the ball. We had to sustain the pressure till we got it back. We press much higher up the pitch. So ultimately we can control the game better and have a higher possession percentage. Which obviously had its, just from looking at it from a theoretical point of view. So we sat down and thought, right, okay, well, what does that then mean to us from a physical point of view? What do we sort of potentially need to now work on in this pre-season to make sure that we have the capacity to do that? And that's sort of where we sort of sat down and looked at it. So we knew that if you're playing sort of a high press game, that all around the team there's going to be a much higher physical requirement potentially, depending on the game, from everyone in the team. Normally if your defenders are just dropping deep and sitting back, then they don't typically have to work as hard if they're trying to high press man mark players up the pitch. We knew that we need to maintain high work rate for much longer periods of time, because if we're losing the ball and trying to do sustained pressure to try and win it back as quickly as possible. That could go on for a period of time till it happened. You know, we weren't getting that same sort of recovery, and when we've just dropped back into a defensive shape and frustrated teams, we knew that we were going to potentially have to work for, let's say, high work rate for much longer durations. And then a little bit like what I just said there, potentially, you know, high-speed running distances would be great for our defensive players. If we're pressing higher up the pitch, leaving more space in behind, and we're opening ourselves up to potential counter-attack balls in behind, where our three sort of central defenders are going to have to do potentially a lot more high-speed running than what they're normally used to. So what was our action plan? So we basically just set higher weekly targets across everything for all the players. Not that much, but just slightly higher. So we, you know, were able to and had the capacity to do that extra kilometre or extra 200 metres of high-speed running during a game. But looking at slightly more detail in terms of, you know, if we knew that we were going to have to sustain pressure for higher periods of time, for longer durations, then we also increased our small-sided games duration on our intensive days. So normally they're a big fan over here doing like small-sided games like 4v4s, 5v5s they do it for like 1.5, 2-minute reps, and then they just do a lot of those reps. And their thinking was that, you know, we're going to do that because we want those 1.5 to 2 minutes to be really highly intense. And that, in one way, sort of complemented their game model in terms of sitting back deep and then hitting them on a counter attack, and that would be, you know, their really 1.5, 2 minutes of really intense work, and then doing that over and over again. But we knew, like I say, we need to increase that if we're going to try and sustain pressure. So we increased the duration to like 3, potentially even 4 minutes, and then we're going to do less reps of that. So we're changing slightly the physiological stimulus there in terms of what we're doing, and the players struggled with it at first, but after sort of 6 to 8 weeks, you know, we saw that the players were able to maintain that intensity over that full 3 minutes, and it was almost at a similar level to what they were doing at 1.5 minutes. So it showed them that it was possible also. And then on our extensive days, you know, we looked to do a lot more sort of 11v11 full pitch to make sure we're getting larger distances in, we're getting more high-speed running in, also transitional drills to try and force those at that high-speed running for our defenders. And then also in those 11v11 and also those small-sided games, we were really sort of strict on enforcing those principles of our defensive methodology in terms of pressing high up, man-to-man marking, you know, and the coach was really, really strict on that. He wouldn't let anyone sort of drop off. So if you were looking at it just from watching the training, you wouldn't see much difference, but actually sort of behind the scenes in terms of the little differences what we were doing, it was actually quite a big difference to what they'd done previously anyway.
Right.
And then what were the sort of results of that? What did we see? We only got 3 competitive games from this season, but we already, after 3 games, we'd seen that, you know, there's a 3% increase across the team, total distance, 2% increase in high-speed running, and the defenders were 5% increase in high-speed running also. So a lot of the things that we sort of predicted and a lot of things that we'd planned for, we're actually seeing that in the games as well. So it showed that sort of what we did from a preparation point was spot on. And then lastly, as you said before, is there any questions on that before we go on to the future of sports science?
No. I was thinking, if we come back to that slide, if we can we come back to that one, Mike?
Yeah.
Afterwards? And then the future of the sports scientist. If we come back to that afterwards, okay. I'll speak to Ian, and I think we'll combine that what your feelings are, where your role will go in the future, both of you, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, thanks, Mike. I'll try and continue now with the sort of coaching side of things. What we will say is that I am a sports scientist, have been for 14 years. So my progression in career is going towards the coaching. I've studied coaching now probably for the last like 5-6 years in terms of game model and tactical periodization. So I thought this presentation would tie in nicely with Mike's sort of physical side of things. So the areas I'll cover is coaching, the game model and tactical periodization, sports science. I'll briefly just touch it because Mike's covered it, the physical periodization. And then I think, Chris, you want to leave that to the end, and the performance coach, the emerging role of the sports science. Okay.
Yeah, if we can have a discussion around that between the three of us would be good, thanks. And then obviously anyone who want to ask any questions after that, that'd be great.
Perfect. So I want to start with a performance statement that we use at the club, and that is that in attack, we want to play aggressively possession football based in creating short passing triangles to create numerical superiority, changing the attack from central to wide, changing of players' positions to identify space, and look to break the lines of defence with creativity. In defence, we'll press high in the right moments and be contact plus patient when required. And a big thing for me is player intelligence and individuality are key to the game model structure here at Ludogorets. So I want to show a little video for all the coaches out there. You're probably better commentating this than me, Chris.
Yeah.
So I'll do my best. Let me see. It's not. Let's skip on. Okay, so it's just a goal against Ferencváros from the kickoff. You'll see down the right-hand side are principles of play. So we're building the play from the back. We're looking to attack centrally and wide. The full-backs are wide. You can see the centre midfielder now will drop in between the centre-backs to create three at the back. Patience in the build-up. We're inside our box. We're still in control of the play. Ball goes wide. Striker comes in short. We break the lines. We look to play wide again, a little bit of creativity, speed, high intensity running, individuality outside of the boot, and we score. So it's just to show our game model in action. The second one is the same against Inter Milan. This is the second phase of building up. Again, the principal player down the side, the physical attributes and the psychological there as well for you. So it's the second phase of building up, goes back to the centre backs. Again, looking to play wide, full back dropping in wide. Again, patience, concentration, mentality to keep possession against the top team, individual technical skill, ball in behind. Now we have speed, we have penetration, a little bit of strength, and we score. So it's just to show you our game model in full flight in a video before we go into the sort of tactical periodization. Obviously, you all know we have the 5 phases of play. You have the attacking phase, the defensive transition, defensive phase, and attacking transition, and your set plays, attack and defend. These are the game model big principles that we use at the club. So you can see in the attack and defending, transition, and the psychology based on those. I'll let you have a little read through it. It's things I've spoke about in the video. And then we go further into the game model and we look at the phases of play. So what's involved in each phase of play. And it's quite in-depth to go through in a short period of time in a presentation. So I'll let you just sort of scan over and see if any of them match with your club or your own thoughts as a coach or what you're developing at the club. This is what we use here. You'll see the transitions in the middle. So what do we do in defensive transition? What do we do in attacking transition? And then down the bottom is the set plays, attacking and defensive. So there's a lot of content there. But what I wanted you to see is then identify what's involved in the training process to create that game model. I'll skip this slide because I covered that at the start. And then really what Mike was speaking about is the sub principles, the collective principles, the sub principles, and the collective principles. So if you look at the top, you've got match day -4, match day -3, match day -1, and match day -2. On the pitch, what we do is break down those principles into the area of the pitch, and I've shaded those areas in the pitch. So like match day -4, sort of Mike touched on, is a strength day, strength and power. Your match day -3 is your high intensity, your condition day, and your match day -2 is the speed day that Mike spoke about, and then your day before the game. And down the bottom, we put some loading factors here. So what the training load is for that day. So the volume, how many repetitions of those drills, what are the durations, and what are the work-rest ratios. Again, Mike sort of touched on that, so I won't go into that. But what's important here is the principles of play relating to the game model. So now we break them down into the attacking and defending phase and what actually we might do training-wise on those days. So if we take the first one, the collective principles in attacking, you can see here we go through the phases and what game principles we apply in those phases. So if you look at the first one, rotation of the triangle midfield, we then go into the players changing zones that you've seen in the video, playing through the zones you've seen in the video, changing the side of attack, which you've seen in the second clip, creating depth with the run in behind, and then transition you've seen in the video as well. They create the patience in the build-up. So fast, are we direct, are we slow in the build-up? And then you can see the defending side. I didn't show you a video, but you can see the principles there that are involved in the defensive phase. Again, you go into the sub principles, which is your speed day. And again, you see the similar principles, slightly different, but similar. And again, the defending, again, you'll see the change. It's more your 1v1s, your 2v2s, your 3v3s, your 4v4s, so smaller areas. And then if you look at the sub principles and attacking, you've got the phases there. So it's more small areas, creating 1v1s. It's a rotation of the triangle in a small area. It can be creating numerical superiority in a small area. It can be underlapping and overlapping actions, which you see in the first goal against Ferencváros. And then we talk about player partnerships. Again, you've seen that in the video with the wide midfielder and the fullback. And then you've got the defending principles are there for you as well. So again, it's small areas. Are we overloaded? Are we underloaded? What players are going into the area to have a player partnership in the press? And then a big one for us is in the phase 1 and 2 is win the ball back within 5 seconds. So again, I just recapping what I showed you in the last 2 slides. So the sub principle days, it's small areas. You're working in technical skills in small areas, and it's quick decision making. The physical load I've put on the right-hand side, which you can see there's the strength day, which is high volume of accel and decel, which Mike spoke about. And then you've got high velocity of change of directions, and then the heart rate response is there. Again, your sub-principles, which is your speed day, your match day -2. And again, you can see the physical load on the right-hand side. It's high volume of accel, decel, they change directions again, and your heart rate changes slightly because it's bigger areas. And then your collective principles. So it's high intensity running, sprinting actions, and your heart rate changes. But again, you see the principles in the area of the pitch that we used. So I wanted to give you an example of training. So this is the game against Espanyol. This can be used in match day -4, match day -3, or match day -2, depending on the area of pitch that you use. Okay, this is a picture, a screenshot of the attacking phase, building up. Okay, we're playing against a defensive line of 4. We're looking to break the line, and we're looking for players to get in between the lines, technical passing and decision making. So how do we put that into the training concept? So you'll see here in the bottom, I've got the line of defending. Okay, and I'll play the video for you and you can see. So the line of 4 defending, players on the outside, we've got 2 players on the outside and 3 on the inside. Okay, so we're looking to play the ball wide, break the lines, defensive line of 4 are working, switch the play, change the angle of attack, keep possession, keep changing the focus, 1 touch, break the line, maintaining possession, keep passing, control, decision making, finding the space wide. So all the elements are in the game model in one drill. What you will see, though, is we never forget if we lose the ball. So if we lose the ball, there should be a transition. You can see the number 10 highlighted now on the inside. Again, the video continues. But it's to give you an idea of how the training concept breaks down from the game model into a simple drill, which was a European game against Espanyol. Oh, sorry, I think it just went to the transition here. Let me see. Yes. So let's play 5 more seconds. So fast reaction, we lose the ball. As I said, never forget the transition of play. The area closes in, and we try to win the ball back quickly. So it's not just one aspect of the game model. We always remember the transition in everything that we do. So the physical periodization, I just wanted to touch on this. Mike's obviously, he's covered everything in it. But over the match days, you'll see the strength, endurance, the speed, and the focus. what's involved in them, the intensity levels, the volume, the durations, the numbers of players, and what we're looking for in terms of the load for a GPS, your heart rate, and a subjective measure, which is your RPE. I always like to take the RPE from the players. I think it's respected within our industry in terms of sports science, and it's a true reflection of how the players actually feel within the session as well. This is just some data. It's average data from competitive in season. You'll see the match days down the left. What I would say is there's not a big difference. If you look at the total distance, there's not a big difference from our squad. The meters per minute is similar over the first 3 match days, obviously drops match day -1. The high intensity for the first 3 days is similar and only drops match day 1. And really the only change match day 3 is the volume of sprints in terms of distance, but it's actually not that many more efforts. But this is competitive in season, so the game Saturday to Saturday, where all the conditioning work is actually done and we're controlling the load, and it's just the tactical preparation of the team that we're actually looking for within the week. This is how we report back. So the coach would receive this after every session, and it's actually trying to hit the methodology that we're trying to achieve for the day. So you see up the top, we have our match days for strength and power, for speed, for endurance, and then what a match is. If I take the RPE down the left, 1 to 10, if you look along the center from 40 through to 130 is meters per minute, and up the center axis you have accel decel from 60 to 200, and then we use first beat heart rate here, which is a training effect from 1 to 5, goes up the middle. So if you look at where our badge is at the moment, it's for meters per minute 65, as accel decel of 140, and the team RPE is 7, and the training effect was just above 3. Now what we do is that's a squad average. If there's a player who has gone outside of the sort of methodology for the day, and that could be due to the demands of the training or the work that they did individually with the coach, I'll position that player where they've fallen within the methodology. And that's really just to make sure that everyone from the physios, the doctor and the coaching staff know that one player has gone outside of the limits set by the team, and there may be an issue going forward in terms of fatigue, and the physios and the doctor would check that. So it's just a simple, quick feedback to the coaching staff and medical staff that lets us know if we've hit the principles for the day.
Ian, how do you communicate that? What systems do you use to communicate?
Simply, because we have so many languages here, it's gone into a sort of multimedia WhatsApp text, and then it's translated. I mean, our coach here is Czech, our physio is Portuguese, the doctor's Bulgarian, I'm Scottish, as you know. So there's a diverse culture in terms of language, but we have translators here. So it goes into one central feed, and then it's broken down by the translators, and then we have a meeting following that. Right,
okay. So you don't have a system as such where it could be in different languages, for example, when it's easily communicated, it's simply by WhatsApp, and that's
yeah,
most effective for you given the different languages.
It's most effective because, as you know, in football, the day changes. People go off and do other things. There's commitments, media. There's things outside the club that people are involved in. So it goes on WhatsApp, and then it's translated. In the following morning, we'll have our meeting, normally 2 hours, 2.5 hours before the training, with the translators present, and then we'll discuss the daily training for that day. But initially, it's communicated through WhatsApp. It's probably not the way I would do it if there's another club where the common language is the same. But here, that's the process that we have at the club for that communication. Okay. Okay, so just some key points. I think in terms of tactical periodization, I hope you got a sort of insight in how we apply it at the club in terms of the methodology. For me, what the tactical periodization is trying to do is enhance the game model. It's trying to provide the players with a systematic training model. It's trying to provide the players with game reference points, but we try to give them creativity and expression within that reference and game model. And we want to develop the player and the team. In terms of the physical outputs, we speak about game fitness. We speak about limiting fatigue and maintaining peak condition, which Mike spoke about as well. And it's a systematic training of the physiological process of the energy systems. Again, Mike covered that. And then again, Mike covered the limiting potential injuries through overload. And again, we look for player and team development in terms of the physical.
Right.
Okay. I think maybe. So yeah, so you wanted me to speak a little bit about the academies. In terms of the technical and tactical and physical elements, I think they're all applied at age groups, but it's obviously age specific. Again, the next slide will show you how I've broken that down before, not at this club, but at my previous club, Celtic. I think the tactical and physical periodization can be applied from U15 to U16 plus, but they must have the competition and physical qualities at age 15 and 16 to allow them to apply the tactical and physical periodization. If they don't have the competition and physical qualities, I don't think it's the best methodology for the kids. Right. You'll see in this slide is a sort of overview from under 9s all the way through to development squad, which is under 13s. You can see the sort of physical attributes, and then you can see when we're developing them within the season. Again, we had a winter break in December for the kids. But you'll probably see from U9s through to U12s, it's quite block, rigid. And then from U13s, as maturation starts to hit, the blocks start to train, and we look at like windows of opportunity to train those physical attributes. And then as you see U15 and U16, in September, tactical periodization principles will start to come in. And then obviously your U17s and U18s after the pre-season, then we look at tactical periodization, and again for the U23s as well, the development squad. So that's just a sort of brief overview of how it can be applied, I guess, in academy. As I said, once they're mature enough and have the competition level, I think tactical periodization is a good method for academies to use. But I think below that, it's not the best way, and every club will have their own technical and tactical model to develop the kids age specific, and again same for physical attributes.
Yeah, good.
And we'll leave this one just now then, the performance coach. This is my emerging role, this is my own thoughts, but you want to leave that just now, or
well, we'll go into it now. Yeah, go into that now. How you think that your role is changed from obviously starting out at Celtic to what it is now, and to where you see it going?
Yeah, I think as I said at the start, it's like my, I think 15th season now in professional football, and I think I've seen my role and want to change my skill set into the coaching side of things. Maybe not essentially to become a full-time coach and forget my sports science roots, but to see a bridge in the gap between sports science and coaching. Now, you have a head of performance, you have the fitness coach, but what I think and what I see missing at clubs is a performance coach who potentially stays at the club and oversees the fitness, the methodology, and the sort of analysis side of the club. And the methodology remains the same at the club. So what I've put is, obviously every club applies their own philosophy and methodology. The sporting director and the technical directors are mainly responsible for that. But I think the emerging role could potentially be, I call it performance coach. The performance coach basically looks to stabilise the performance and development of a club under the guidance of the sporting director, technical director. Now that's where the first team staff come and go, and that performance coach would always stay and help bridge a gap with the new staff coming in. Obviously the staff coming in would understand there is a philosophy methodology at the club. You could say Barcelona are probably the biggest advocate of that, and they would be responsible for making sure the continuum of the performance of the team. So I broke down into a model. Here where you can see the game model methodology, you would have the head coach and staff that would come in, the sporting director, and then below them would be the sort of club performance coach. I think essentially they should be pro license holder, they should be a sports science or strength and conditioning degree holder, and they should have experience. And they would look after the three areas I said there, the sports science, fitness, and the sort of club analyst. And they would sort of keep the methodology going, no matter if the head coach or the staff were removed for the club for whatever reason. We know within football, that's more than likely within 18 months to 2 years these days. So that was but these are my own personal thoughts and how the sports science role, maybe for me or at clubs, I think can evolve. Obviously, they have to have an influence in the coaching side of things, and you'd have to have the experience at that level as well.
Right.
Okay.
Sorry, the internet just went there a little bit. Yeah. I mean, yeah, well, Ian. So what you'd need to obviously have is that head coach. If there was a change in position, that whoever was coming into the club would need to agree to a tactical periodization model. Then.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think. I mean, if you take, as I said, mentioned Barcelona is probably the biggest advocate of that, where their game model will never change no matter the coach. It remains the same. And Real Madrid are pretty much the same. But I don't think the sporting director of the club normally controls it. Everyone knows those game models there, so any coach going there would apply that. Yeah. And I think that's probably why some coaches maybe struggle when they change, because they're changing the whole game model of a club. You know, if you're sacked from one club and go to another, and the game model is different, you're going in and having to change that game model. And in football, you don't got a lot of time. If you have a pre-season, you've got 4 weeks, and then you're into the season. Certainly at Ludogorets, you've got 3.5 weeks pre-season, then you play a Champions League qualifier. Now, in my opinion, you even the highest level skilled coach cannot change a game model in 3.5 weeks.
Yeah, and with that role, that club performance coach role that you're speaking of, given the detail that you're going into, from particularly obviously the physical elements and what you need to think about, obviously ensuring that they are being hit within the tactical periodization model. How much time do you see that person being able to concentrate on the actual coaching itself? So would they just monitor, or how do you see it?
I think they're involved within the coaching process. The head coach and his staff would lead the process. I think the performance coach is only guiding what's applied at the club. So it would depend really. I think that would be a discussion with the head coach and their staff if they wanted the performance coach involved in what scenario in terms of the grass delivery. I think they would be training obviously every session and overseeing, as I say, the sports science, the fitness and the analysis and bridging the gap for the head coach and their staff. But I think that would probably be a conversation. And again, it's building up probably rapport with the new head coach that comes in, you know, as the weeks progress.
Yeah. And then you say, like, obviously you mentioned you got the pro license on there. So it's really that credibility you're already building up from a coach perspective with when that coach, you know, when the head coach comes in, that you know that this guy understands what we're doing on the grass. It's not just, you know, I think years ago, isn't it, sports scientists were kind of seen as, well, these kind of geeks who just want to stop people working hard and, you know, or maybe doing, you know, when it's now these days, it's obviously it's so important within the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, that's the start, the last probably 5-6 years, my thought process has changed in terms of the coaching, not just the sports scientist and looking at data and numbers on the laptop. We have to understand the whole process to be able to impact the process. I've spoke before on Stat Sports about red lines. I don't believe there is red lines for performance unless you're doing something crazy in training, like, you know, lots of sprinting that Mike said will cause a problem. But I think we have to give the coaches freedom to coach, and it's our job to give them freedom, but give a framework that they can go and coach the players, because ultimately the coaching is what will make the performance better at the end of the day. Everyone can increase the physical capability if you're sensible and smart and educated, which most people are in terms of sports science, but really the game model and those tactical principles and how you train the players will make the players better and enhance the performance. That's my experience, both at Celtic and here at Ludogorets. I mean, I worked with Brendan Rodgers, and he's probably the first biggest coach I've worked with. I've seen tactical periodization make such a dramatic change within such a small period of time. And Celtic had a game model that fitted Brendan Rodgers' style of play. You know, it was a simple task, not a simple task, but it was an easier task, him coming in and applying tactical periodization at a higher level than I've ever seen. which allowed the players to develop their game, gave confidence, gave everything that we speak about within football. Again, when I came here as well, the same probably happened here, although we've changed the coach many times, but the principles stay the same. We play the same style of football. You could watch Ludogorets for probably the past 5, 6, 7 years, and we play the same. It's high velocity attacking football, you know. We're not scared to take the ball and go and attack. We're not scared to have a high press. We're not scared of 1v1s. We try to develop that game model and try and compete in Europe. The technical level and the player ability is not the same level, so we can't compete, but we try to compete at the highest level by that process.
Yeah, it's interesting because we had Robert Hoof on yesterday, speaking to Robert Hoof, and obviously at the start of his career, it was when he was at Chelsea, he had Ranieri, but then Mourinho came in, and obviously the training completely changed as to what you mentioned around the model that he had, the tactical periodization model that he implemented. But then he also talked about at the end that Brendan Rodgers about the difference that he was making at Leicester. We were talking about individual development. So not only obviously talking about that the team perspective, but also being able to get them extra 2% out of players from an individual perspective as well as the team, and also implementing the model there. So you know that's following on from that yesterday.
Yeah, it's like I said, the start of the performance statement and the player's individuality and creativity for me is key because the framework's there, but you have to make that player feel special and be one a part of something, you know, and be part of the game model and play an important role as a player. But they've got to have their freedom to play football the way they believe football should be played.
Yeah, that's actually one of the questions I wrote down prior to us speaking, but just about, you know, the relationships you build as a sports scientist. Are they easier to build with the players themselves, or is it easier to build with the staff who are not believers in what you're trying to implement? You know, they might have come from a different background in terms of, you know, not agreeing with the tactical periodization.
I don't think the players are maybe aware that tactical periodization is being applied. I think the players are really in a training process. And when we do a presentation to the players in terms of this is the training methodology, but we don't really break it down maybe to the level that I went on the slides, the attack and defending phases. They don't get a detailed game model, what we apply, but I think they realise within the training that the level of coaching is higher, and every drill that they do has a concept towards the game. Right.
Yeah. Okay, going over to you, Mike. I mean, do you need to show that slide, or can you talk about it?
No, so I can just talk about it. It's to be honest, I agree with Ian in terms of, you know, I do think there's this emerging role as a performance type coach. You know, my slide was sort of about, you know, where did sports science stem from, and it came from your initial sort of fitness coach. But, you know, he was the one that did everything. You know, he'd do the gym work, he'd do the warm up, he'd be running players afterwards. You know, stood on the side of the pitch with his, you know, stopwatch and his clipboard or whatever. You know, and he's really stick to measure out the running meters. And I think, as it's evolved and as technology's evolved, I think, you know, it's evolved into, you know, sports science in terms of monitoring players with GPS technology, getting more information in terms of the physical loading actually during football. So I think that was the initial sort of first step in terms of the differences between a fitness coach and sports scientist. And then I think, going forward now, I think it's going to stem in two sort of ways. I think now the fact we can quantify more football-based stuff, or more of the football-based work, that it's going to lead into having a performance-type coach where he has a very good knowledge of sports science, but then also a very good knowledge of coaching to be that link. And then on the flip side of that, I think with the advances in technology and I think the advances in data science, I think that other aspect of it we'll go into more dealing with the data and dealing with the data science and looking at working alongside the performance coach to inform him exactly sort of how it's going from a physical point of view. So that's sort of how I see it stemming off in that sense. You know, and obviously it depends by, you know, people's budgets and manpower that they have at the clubs. But I think certainly top clubs are already going in that direction. You know, you see a lot of jobs advertised now for data scientists at football clubs. So I think it's all starting to sort of push in that direction. And I think, you know, if you can have, if you got the budget to have numbers of member of staff and have a department, then I think that they're the sort of different types of roles that will be in it. Along also with your S&C coach, you know, your nutritionalist and your psychologist, if you also have that.
Yeah. And where does it fit in? You mentioned this S&C, obviously. How does the gym-based sessions, how do they fit into the model?
Yeah, well, if you read sort of the real hardcore tactical periodization stuff from Victor Freyd and them, like, there's, you know, they see any time that's not put on the pitch as wasted time. But I think, you know, that's sort of evolved, and a lot of people actually put it in practice. Certainly the coaches that I've spoke to about it, they do understand that, yeah, you need to do some kind of S&C strength work, you know, whether that's just, you know, ever so slightly from a preventional point of view, but they do see the benefit of it. You know, the research is there that they can't really argue with, to be honest, and there needs to be certainly an element of that. I think you get a lot from a strength and conditioning point of view. You get a lot from the pitch, you know, in terms of, if you look at, for instance, plyometrics, you know, people jumping over hurdles, you know, but if someone jumps through a header, that's a plyometric contraction, you know. So spend more time, you know, jumping for headers and jumping over hurdles. You know, you don't need to necessarily train that. But I think the one thing that you can't replicate on a football pitch is sort of max strength work with external load put on the body, you know. So I think there's still always going to be that need for sort of strength work externally, and how you fit that into the system. Yeah, that's a sort of fine art of it, really. I personally like to do it on the strength day where you're doing the small-sided games, so it complements it in that sense. I'll always do it post-session, never pre-session, if I'm doing strength work, because for me the main focus of that training day is what they're doing on the pitch. So I'm prepared to sacrifice a little bit from the strength element in the gym than the strength element on the pitch. So
yeah. How about you, Ian? How does that fit into yours?
I think probably my earlier career, I was not heavy in the gym, but I believed fully in the gym and athletic development, and, you know, players must get stronger, they must get quicker, and, you know, the gym sessions will be a part of their development. As I've progressed, again, the last 5-6 years, I probably came away from that, and I've weighed up, is the gym session worth the coaching time? If a player is physically developed to their limit as in they're a professional at the moment, they play professional football, the time spent in the gym, is that going to make them a better footballer, or is it going to be the time on the pitch with the coach or with sports science and the coach working on something specific in terms of the game model? Is that going to make them a better player over time? I believe it will. The issue in the gym for me is injury prevention and being allowed, the player being allowed to play at the highest level continuously to be able to deal with the load. Do they need extra work in terms of development for weaknesses within the athletic ability, but not in terms of trying to make them quicker or stronger? I don't think those sessions for me anymore are appropriate. I think it's more appropriate, it's the injury prevention, the biomechanical work, the physiotherapy work. But the more time spent on the pitch, for me, the better. If you look at time over the week, if you do 2 gym sessions, if it's a Saturday, those gym sessions might be half an hour each. So that's 1 hour a week. If you spread that over a season, it's a lot of time. It's a lot of time not on the pitch.
Yeah, especially when there are so many things to look at 4 players. The I mean, Thierry Henry said recently, didn't he? He didn't spend any time in the gym.
It's the environment the players are in. It's specific strength. The environment the players in will make them a clever and intelligent player. Again, that goes back to the coaching process. I think I'm just looking. Chris Murray Jones is with a question.
I was going to go into them in a sec.
Oh,
yeah, I mean, should we go into them? Yeah, that's a good one to go into there, because Murray's just asked, Ian, how much ball rolling time do you look to across your physical periodization model?
In terms of ball on the pitch, on the grass?
Yeah, I mean, the English FA, didn't they? That was all part of their, a few years back, was, you had to have a certain percentage of ball rolling, and that was all part of the English FA's coach education.
I mean, I've been in sessions with Brendan Rodgers where sessions been 2 hours, and maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes has been tactical walkthrough 10v0. So there's no load in that, but it's coaching. The ball's rolling. He's coaching the team in a specific movement for a Champions League game, which he believes is going to help the team. So that 2 hour session, 40 minutes of that is a sort of tactical awareness game model adjustment to the team that we're going to play in the Champions League. So the ball could be rolling for 2 hours, it could be rolling for an hour. It depends what the coach is really looking for. In terms of like a warm-up, I prefer a short warm-up, physical warm-up, and then straight into ball work. Again, that's going into the tactical periodization sort of that I spoke about. I think that's important. Yeah.
Yep, great. And Mike, Anshul's asked, what is the basic difference between sub-principle and sub-sub-principle?
Well, it stems from the tactical point of view. In terms of, you'll have your main principles from what you want to do in each sort of game moment. So off the top of my head, that would be sort of, your main principle might be, let's say, high press. Then your sub-principle from that might be man-to-man marking. And then your sub-principle from that would be, good communication between your defensive line. So just the sort of the finer details of your principles, really.
Okay, great. Simon McDonald has asked, on the actual match day itself, how active are you during the game? And is it possible to actively be involved and implement change? I'll ask you both then on that question. No, to be honest, as a sports scientist, I've debated thinking, can we get the data live in the game, and what effect would that have? Can you really tell if somebody's dropped off potentially? You could look at the last 5 minutes of what each player's done and combine that with your subjective reading of the game. If you're going for a really high intense moment in the game where, there's lots of sustained pressure and there's lots of, counter-attacks going on, but you see one of your players is really struggling from a data point of view, and so you can see the number right there, then potentially that could inform you that, that potentially that player's then fatigued and that might need changing. But, I don't think you'll find any sports scientist that's going to be bold enough to walk up to the manager during the game and say, you need to take him off because he's tired. So I think, that there's a wage structure in the club, and that's what the gaffer gets paid the big bucks for, I think. You have done that yourself?
Yeah, we actually do live monitoring in pre-season, only from a physical aspect to let the coach know the intensity of the game. But no way would I say to a coach, player A has hit any limits. Football is a decision-making sport, high in technical and tactical level. So a player who is tired might not necessarily mean to take him off. You could get a free kick in the next 30 seconds and he's your man that hits the free kick, or lady that hits the free kick, and they're the one that's going to score the winning goal for you. For me, there's no way that I would take a player off. But we do use GPS Live in pre-season, only to let the players know the intensity of the game. and let the coach know the intensity of the game. If the game is low, we try to drive the intensity of the game ourselves and not let our performance drop down, or at the end of the match to do some extra top-ups. In one pre-season match, we actually played 10v10 half pitch after a match because the intensity was so low.
Right, really. I mean, this might be a bit wacky and crazy, but do you see in the future where players can actually tell what there might be something, or, you know, we talk about chips in your arms, things like all different things like that, where they can actually know where they are physically in a game, so they can make decisions? Because I mean, is that ever possible, do you think?
I think that's something that I'm sort of starting to look at in my PhD, in terms of, can we quantify quality of movement, you know, in terms of with the GPS, can we start looking at how players are actually moving? So yeah, I suppose, you know, if you're looking at that throughout a training session or even a game, you know, if we can do it accurately, then that quality of movement starts to deteriorate, then yeah, then that could be a potential sort of sign that a player's fatigue, you know, is tired, or maybe starting to load one side more than his other in terms of his legs, you know, if he's picked up a bit of a knock. That's something that I'm looking at. Do I know if it's possible just yet? I'm not really there yet, so I can't say it's definitely there, but I think as long as technology is going to keep improving, the more research that comes out, the more information that we can get of the physical status of our players, then the more informed decisions we can make. But like Ian said, even if a player's, you know, 80% dead in a game and, you know, completely loading one side up, his right side to his left, and it looks like he's going to tear his hamstring, like, he might score a free kick in the next sort of instance of the game. So, you know,
Steven Gerrard against West Ham in the cup final.
Exactly.
Players start to self-pace. If a player knows they're tired and fatigued, they will self-pace. You know, and if we go back to the topic of tonight, the tactical periodization, if a teammate knows that another teammate's tired and they know the format of the game model and the defensive and attacking phases, then they will cover the space for that player to maybe allow them have their creativity, or, you know, allow them to get on the ball. Say it's a number 10, for instance, your centre midfielder might do his running or pressing to allow him to stay in space, you know, to allow him to self-pace the rest of the match, because we need that player on the pitch. And that, again, comes to the training process for me. It goes right back to what we said at the start, you know, the performance of the team, the game model, the team and the communication, and the training process is key to that.
Yeah, I used to do that a lot, actually. Get my centre midfield to do my running.
The good players do that, Chris. The good players do that.
I was way ahead of my time, you see. One thing I was going to say there as well is, in terms of your relationship with the other staff. I'm not talking the head coach or his assistant, but from the links obviously between the physical output of players and also the psychological or possibly social side of it. How much time do either of you spend with, if you've got a psychologist in the club or previously had? Is there much of that?
I think that sorry, you want to go, Mike? Yep.
No, sorry, go on. You go first, you know.
No, we have had psychologists both at Celtic and at Ludogorets, and I think the coaches and the performance staff of the psychologists, although we're not qualified as in terms of sports psychology, but we're the ones who have the daily conversations with the players around the training base. I think sports psychology works better for me, maybe in terms of lifestyle and things that the players are dealing with, maybe outside of, or within football or outside of football, but not in terms of performance. I think that's up to the coach, and I think that's why the top coaches are one of the reasons why they are top coaches, because they connect with players. And they give them that freedom, creativity, and love, really, the players want to achieve their highest level. So my experience has been good and bad, but I think it works better maybe for outside of football things.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm similar in my stance in that, in terms of, yeah, we're, you know, the first staff, the coaches, they're the ones that are the main contact with the players. But I still think there's a role for a psychologist in terms of maybe being in there to advise the coaches. You know, if a coach is struggling with a certain scenario of a player, of how to deal with it, because at the end of the day, we aren't actual qualified psychologists. So, yeah, but we should at least have the bit about you to understand when you're maybe a little bit out of depth in a situation, or maybe, you know, you need some advice from a psychologist how to deal with a certain situation. So I think that would be, in my eyes anyway, the most powerfully used role of a psychologist in the football club, to advise the staff. But you're right, it's, you know, we're the ones that see them every day, and we'll sit around every morning sitting there discussing players. How is he? You know, what's going on? You know, if like I say, so if he's low on something from a physical point of view, you know, why is that? Why does everyone think that? You know, has he been complaining of this? Has he been complaining of that? Did he get a bollock the day before? You know, from the coach? Did he get left out of the team at the weekend? You know, is he about to go away on international duty and, you know, wants to protect himself? So, yeah, I think all the data and information that we have just sort of highlights scenarios, situations, and then we all use our knowledge and perceptions of that player to sort of, you know, come up with the best solution for it.
Yeah, right.
There's some questions there, Chris, on the chat.
Yeah. I've just seen Murray Jones. What will the future look like in terms of physical performance and output?
Yeah, I think it's only going one way. I think, you know, it has been going one way for the last, I don't know, 20 odd years. You know, players are sprinting more, they're doing more high-speed running. But I think it only gets to a certain level. I think once you hit the real elite level, then that isn't the deciding factor anymore. You know, players, yes, are getting fitter and stronger, but, you know, when you're looking at the top leagues like the Premier League, or, you know, I did the project for FIFA on the World Cup, and we looked at all the physical data from every team in the World Cup, and France and Croatia were two of the lowest physically outputting teams. You know, they're two teams that reached the final. I think France, for total distance, were 28th out of 32, and I think for like high speed running as well, they were 26th. So, you know, I think the physical performance and output, it'll take you so far, and it can be, if you're not fit enough, it'll be it'll be a limiting factor. But I think once everyone's sort of at a similar level, then it comes down to everything else.
Yeah.
You know, I would say the same as Mike there. Like, my experience with Celtic and Ludogorets, we were a medium European team, medium level European team. When we meet a higher level, our physical output is always higher because we don't have the ball. We have to work to get the ball back. So our transitions are higher. We can't keep the ball for the same period of time as we can against a team who are equal or less than us. So you have to work harder physically, whether that's high intensity or sprinting or accel, decel. I remember playing Barcelona, and the players ran less total distance in high intensity and sprint, but they all reported they were absolutely knackered. But the accel, decel data was so big, it was huge. It was like 25% more than what we'd ever done before, because they're just going left, they're going right, they're going forward, they're going back. You can't get the ball, you can't get near the ball. So different games will have different physical outputs.
Yeah. Brilliant. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much. I really, really appreciate your time. And obviously, I'll speak to you both very, very soon.
Thanks, Chris.
Cheers, Brony. Thanks for
everyone.
Cheers. Thank you, everyone.